Make sure that. Okay, so we were at the chapter of promotion of goodness, and we're talking about the importance of doing small good deeds and winning people's hearts. And the last story we had ended with was when the Jewish lady, she had made an assassination attempt at the Prophet ﷺ, and she brought him a poisoned lamb, and he ate from the lamb. And for the rest of his life, you could see then feel he could feel the effects of that poison throughout his life. And the scholars are divided over, was that poison the cause of his death, or was it actually a natural death, right? But we do know that Anas radiallahu anh, he said that he felt the effects of that poison till the very last illness that he had. So the last hadith in this chapter is Ibn Abbas reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Teach others and make things easy, not difficult. When any of you is in a state of anger, let him keep silent." So it kind of just teaches us about the Prophet ﷺ's natural way of being with people, how he taught them, how he was showing them from his character. And so he said that teach people, but make things easy, not difficult. Because sometimes as a teacher, you believe that the more difficult I make it for the student, the better, right? Like I'm challenging the student. But there's a context for that. And so you shouldn't make things difficult just for the sake of making them difficult. Like there's some teachers who, all of their exams, like all the questions are trick questions. And you're like, get confused a little bit. Like 1 or 2 trick questions are okay. But if your entire exam is a trick question, then the students are going to start hating you because they'll be like, well, are you out to get us? Or like, do you actually want to teach us? The intent, right? Yeah, you start questioning a little bit like, does this teacher actually want good for me, right? And you don't want the teacher-student relationship to get spoiled, because then the person will be like, well, are you really teaching me or just constantly testing me all the time, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't somebody who just like constantly tested people. Maybe like 1 or 2 times that might arise in a situation, but mostly his goal was, how do I nurture these people? How do I nurture their iman? How do I give them more tawakkul? How do I teach them tawakkul, right? How do I teach them the proper way, the halal and haram, everything? But his goal was to nurture overall, right? He was sent as a mercy. So he said, make things easy and don't make them difficult. And so among the things that he had to teach was first that what is God's final message? Because all the prophets, they came with a certain message. And the Prophet ﷺ, he came with the same message, but with additional laws, right? With different laws, because every time there's a Rasul that comes, they come with a new Sharia. So the message that he reinforced was that of Tawheed, right? That there's only one God, there's no God but Allah, and every single prophet had this message. But in addition to that, he came to teach how to pray, how to fast, how to give zakat, all the different pillars that we have. How did the Sharia change? What are some of the things that we are allowed to do that previous nations were not allowed to do, and vice versa. So his job was to teach the guidance of Allah, the guidance of the Book of Allah. And he came to teach, to reinforce Tawheed, which actually takes away shirk, right? Because the mushrikeen, they were stuck in this idol worship and idolatry, and they used to mistreat their women and stuff like that. So he came to also cancel shirk. Okay, so they're saying that as a teacher, one of the most important things you have to do is make things clear and not deceive people, right? Not deceive your students. So the elite of the Jews, for example, they had this like monopoly over knowledge, right? They considered, the Jews of Medina considered themselves like, we are the knowledgeable people, we are the people of the book, the Torah was revealed to us. So they kind of gate kept the knowledge. Like it was like, we will read the book, we will interpret it for you, and you're not allowed to read the book because you're the common people, you're the lay people, right? You're gonna go astray. So it sounded like a righteous thing to do, like, oh, I'm protecting the people from reading the book and misinterpreting it, which unfortunately sounds a lot like what Muslims do as well. Like in a lot of circles, unfortunately, there are scholars who will be like, well, Muslims shouldn't just, don't read the translation because it'll lead you astray, right? Or that you shouldn't you should have that, it's kind of like you have to go through a teacher always, right? But we have a balance. We have a balance, right? Like any Muslim can read the Quran. Any Muslim should read the translation, yes. But should we derive rulings from it? No. Right? That's where we draw the line. We're not going to come up with our own definition of halal and haram. If we don't understand, we ask, right? Allah says that himself. Like if you don't know, then ask the people of knowledge, the people of remembrance. But you have access to the Quran and Sunnah just as much as a scholar has access to Quran and Sunnah. Right? We have access just the way that a sheikh does. So the Prophet ﷺ came to teach us that there are no barriers between you and Allah. Right? You have direct access to Allah when it comes to dua, when it comes to intercession, when it comes to your what do you call it? confession, right? We don't have a thing of confession like the Christians do. If you commit a sin, you go straight to Allah and you confess to Allah, right? That's tawbah, essentially. So we don't have any barrier between us and Allah. We don't have to go through anybody. And then same thing with our knowledge. We can read the Quran, we can open up a hadith book, we can take the virtues, we can take those things. The only thing we don't do is rulings. That's the only thing, right? Virtues like, if you say like, the Prophet said, read Subhanallah 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times, Allahu Akbar 33 times, right? You can take those things and apply them because you already know that they're there to be applicable, right? And the scholars have written books like, for example, the 40 Ahadith, right? The 40 Hadith of Nawawi. Any Muslim can pick that book up and they can act on it because he compiled them specifically for the average believer. Right? The average Muslim can go to that book. But if the average person goes to like Sahih Bukhari, then they'll be a little lost, right? So what the scholars have done is that they've created these like collections specifically for the average Muslim, right?
So is that like you know how they declare like some things culturally we do,
Mm-hmm.
like they're like bidah, kind of like you're not supposed to, like is that kind of because people have taken what they've heard and not like touched it by like there's some things like culturally that people do and they're like you shouldn't do that, this is not like a proven or
Can you give an example?
like when the prayer rug, folding the prayer rug.
Oh, yeah.
That's a perfect example.
I wouldn't call that a bid'ah though, because it's not an act of worship.
Okay.
So it would fall under bid'ah only if, well, there's so many conditions actually for bid'ah. Like there's.
But it's still something you should. Like, should you avoid stuff like that, or I don't like. Sometimes you see certain sheikhs saying like, don't do these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like especially if you're like watching like videos of different sheikhs. Like, don't
Yeah.
do things that you don't know are true to be.
Yeah.
Like just because.
It's a tricky one because so bid'ah is by definition something that, and this is a very simplistic definition, something the Prophet ﷺ didn't do, like an act of worship he didn't do, but he had nothing preventing him from doing it. So he could have done it, he chose not to. That would be a bid'ah. So like some scholars would say like Mawlid is bid'ah. Why do they say that? Because they're like, well, if the Prophet ﷺ wanted to celebrate his own birthday, he could have done it, right? So you have one camp, and again, I have sheikhs from both camps, so. And I'm not even going to give a ruling, but like this camp says, the Salafi camp will say, the Prophet ﷺ could have done it, but he didn't. And so celebrating his birthday would be an act of worship because you're like praising him, you're studying salawat, all of that stuff. So they're like, if he wanted us to do it, why didn't he do it? So if we do it, then they're like, you're doing bid'ah because you're introducing something to the religion. Whereas the other camp is like, well, the Prophet ﷺ, just because he didn't do it doesn't mean he disapproved of it. And the thing that about Mondays, right, fasting on Mondays, he actually did acknowledge his birthday. He didn't celebrate it, but he acknowledged it. He said, I like to fast on Mondays because this is the day Allah gave me life. So he did acknowledge his own birthday. So like now the thing is, okay, what's the difference between acknowledgement and celebration, and how do different cultures interpret acknowledgement and celebration, right? So I guess both of them have valid points. So if you listen to like an hour-long lecture from these people, you'll be convinced, and then you listen to another lecture from these people, you'll be convinced.
That's exactly how I feel. Like,
Yeah.
Stuff like this,
Yeah.
listen to both sides, like,
So I would just say pick your sheikh and stick with him. That's what I would recommend.
I think the one who celebrate, they go off the extreme in the religion border. They do a lot of things that absolutely the women want
Yeah.
to do together.
Mhm.
They make some,
Yeah.
take stuff, not,
Mhm.
not corporate, because they kind of mix together the people.
Mhm.
They make, something, they make their own song. I think
Yeah.
like that, they are all of too far.
Mhm. Yeah.
Some culture country that, yeah.
Mm.
Some country they go to Umrah,
Mhm.
the Mawlid. It's a Mawlid day. They don't go other times. They only do the Umrah, the time of the Mawlid. The time of the Mawlid, they go to the Haram, they do
Mhm.
and then the Haram is Qur'an. They say, what's going on here?
Mhm.
It's a Mawlid. Well, why don't you go to all the other and go?
Mhm.
Well, all the other time,
making it holier
why you
when it
choose
was
only this
Yeah.
Mawlid time? Why don't you go the whole year?
For what? Umrah?
No,
yeah,
Umrah,
she's saying they only go during.
For in Rabiul Awal, you mean?
Huh?
In Rabiul Awal, they go for Umrah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they just choose that now.
Okay. So, I mean, now that the Mawlid came up, I feel like I need to say this. There was a post I read by one of the da'is, like in the US, like one of the scholars, and he said that in this country, if you are attending a Mawlid with your family, oh, that's the best thing you can do. because of the community spirit, the family spirit. There's so many other things that your kids could be going to, that if you raise them on a culture, let's say, of going to mawlids, then they're going to have a core memory of something positive associated with Islam. So that was just his take, right? He's not giving a fatwa. He's just saying that if you do choose to celebrate because your sheikh says so, this is one of the benefits, that your kids receive a sense of community.
That would be the intent.
Yeah, that is the intent. And a lot of, and even the scholars who do allow mawlid, by the way, they themselves say that these un-Islamic practices should not be done. Like the stuff you mentioned about, some people, they sing nasheeds and then they throw money. I've even seen that. It's ridiculous, yeah. There are some circles where like the group will be doing the drum and stuff, the duf, whatever, and they're singing nasheeds, but people are throwing money at them. Like the way you do it, like, these really bad places. So it's ridiculous, some of those. So the sheikhs who are more balanced, they will definitely speak out against those practices. They'll say that if you are attending a mawlid, make sure it's like segregated, or at least halal, separation, or there should be no free mixing, there should be no like music, like actual music, there should be no dancing or singing or wailing or whatever it is, and just make sure that you're actually just making dhikr, right? Or if you're singing like, the women are not showing their voices and singing. So they'll have these guidelines, and so I've been to places where they'll follow the guidelines, and then other places are like just kind of crazy. So yeah, this is, I don't want to. Yeah. But yeah, about the prayer rug thing, that's just like a cultural thing. I just got into the habit of folding it, but I think it's better too because of dust, not for any religious reason. But I'm like, hey, if you fold the prayer mat, like there won't be any dust on it. Not that shaitan's gonna pray anyway. So yeah. Okay, so the second part of the hadith was, when any one of you is in a state of anger, let him keep silent. So first, it specifically applies to the teacher, and then it applies to everybody else. So as a teacher, you should not be quick to anger because you're going to, turn your students off. Like that's part of making things difficult for them. Because if you're in a classroom, whether it's a child or a teenager or an adult, if you're the teacher who constantly gets angry, the kid won't be able to participate in class. I mean, the student won't be able to participate. They'll feel scared to ask questions. They won't feel comfortable to voice their opinion, and that's not a learning environment. That's just like a indoctrination environment. You don't want them to feel that way. So the Prophet ﷺ as a teacher, he didn't get angry when people asked questions, right? He only got angry if somebody was being insolent, right? Like not being disrespectful or something like that. He wouldn't get angry just because someone is curious and asking questions. And then they're saying that if, as a teacher, you're going to regret it if you show a moment of anger because your student will be turned against you, and then you won't be able to build that connection with them again, which is huge. Like even the Islamic scholars like Imam al-Ghazali and stuff, they talk about the importance of the the teacher-student relationship. And if you don't nurture that relationship, you're not putting that student in a position to learn, right? Because you've made them afraid of you. Because you have this ego thing, whatever going on, power trip, like I need them to respect me, but respect is earned, right? It's commanded, it's not demanded, right? Because when you act a certain way, then the students will respect you, but if you're like shouting at them or whatever, they're just gonna be like, yeah, I don't wanna learn here anymore, right? And I've heard people say about some du'at as well, like, oh, this guy, I know his stuff is solid, but I don't wanna listen to him because he's shouting all the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's it, he's just shouting all the time. And I was like, okay. Yeah, and the amount of people I've heard who like Omar Suleiman, he's so soft-spoken. Yeah. Like they're like, I just love listening to him because he's so calm and he smiles and like, yeah, it's therapeutic. So a lot of people who had spiritual trauma, they actually healed by listening to people like him because they're like, I feel like he gets it. He's soft. I feel like he sees me as a person. Mm-hmm. So the way you teach, like it doesn't matter how many credentials you have, but the way you teach, it's like you can really push somebody away from Islam or you can bring them closer, right? So yeah, that was just about the dealings with the people. The next chapter is reliance on God, ease and simplicity. So this is part of a longer story that we had done in Shama'il, but I'll just, actually not this one. No, that's coming next. Okay, so in this example, Ata ibn Yasar, he said, I met Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and I said to him, tell me how God's messenger, ﷺ, is described in the Torah. And he said, yes, by God, he is described in the Torah with some of his qualities mentioned in the Quran. So the ayah is, where Allah says, O Prophet, we have sent you as a witness, a bearer of good news, and a warner, and a guardian for the unlettered. And then there's like, I think that was end quote, because I can't tell if this is from the Quran or from the Torah, because I tried to find it in the Quran and I didn't find it. So I'm assuming this is the part from the Torah. a guardian for the unlettered. You are my servant and my messenger. I have named you Al-Mutawakkil, the one who totally relies on God, who is neither rude nor unkind, nor quarrelsome in the markets, who does not repel a bad deed by a good one, but forgives and pardons. God the Exalted will not cause him to die until he has, through him, strengthened the faith that has become crooked, so that its followers will say, there is no deity other than God, opening with this statement, blind eyes, deaf ears, and sealed hearts. Okay, so this part is actually it's part of a hadith, and it comes in the tafsir of this ayah. So it's not the ayah itself, but it's what the Sahabi is saying in regards to the ayah. And then Abdullah bin Amr said, this Quranic verse, O Prophet, we have sent you as a witness, a bearer of good news, and a warner, is also in the Torah in similar words, but like not completely the same, but in similar wording. So Abdullah bin Amr is one of the learned companions. So he's one who has like a high level of knowledge. And that's why the other companion asked him that, tell me, give me a comparison of how the Prophet ﷺ is describing the Torah and the Quran. So he read this ayah for him. And then what he said, what is meant by a witness is that all the earlier messengers, they came with a certain message. And so the Prophet ﷺ is asked to be a witness to that message by sealing the message itself. Right? So he's not just coming and saying like, okay, yeah, this is a new message, but he's bearing witness to everything that came before. And that's why Allah refers to him as a witness. And on the Day of Judgment, he's going to be a witness over his ummah. And Allah's going to ask him like, how did you deliver the message and all that? And he's going to tell him, which he already did, right? In the farewell khutbah, one of the things the Prophet ﷺ said at the end of the farewell khutbah, he raised his hands and he looked up to the heavens. I believe he said it 2 or 3 times. He said, Ya Allah, bear witness that I have given your message to your people, right? And that was kind of like, that's when people started crying because they realized that, okay, he's gonna be passing away soon. What is meant good news is that people who are in darkness, who are in ignorance, the news that is most likely going to reach them is going to be bad, right? If they were to be left in that state, the news that would have reached them would be of hellfire. But because Allah sent the Prophet ﷺ, because he rectified them, right? He taught them the Quran, he made them Muslim. The message that now is going to come to them is good news from Allah, right? So now they're going to be receiving the glad tidings of Jannah. So the Quraysh, from the people who lived at that time, whoever accepted Islam, they got the good news. And that includes us as well, of course, the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. And a warner. So those who don't listen, the Prophet ﷺ's role is to be warning them like, hey, this is the message. If you don't listen, this is what's going to come next, right? And the word that's used is nadir, right, as a warner. So nadir is a specific word in Arabic that means that someone who cares and they're warning because they care. So it's not just simply like, just kind of like when you get an Amber Alert on your phone, that's a warning, right? But it's not like they don't really care about you. They're just kind of like the government's just sending it out, right, to everybody. But imagine you have like somebody in your family who's like, hey, don't make this decision. It's going to be really bad for you. Like, they give you the pros and cons and they're like warning you against something you're about to do because they're so invested, right? They're like really care about your well-being. That's what nadir means. So the Prophet ﷺ was nadir, meaning he was so personally invested in our betterment, in our salvation. That's why he was constantly like worried about what is going to happen to us. So those are the 3 words Allah uses in the ayah itself. And then the rest of the hadith says, a guardian for the unlettered. So the unlettered refers to the Prophet ﷺ being not knowing how to read or write, and it's a testament to his prophethood, because if he had known how to read and write, then the Quraysh, the accusations they put on him, they might be valid. But Allah completely removed that possibility by making sure that he was unlettered. Okay, guardian means that those among them who respond to his message will be guarded from the fire of hell. Okay, and then Allah switches the tense. So he talks about the Prophet ﷺ in 3rd person, and then he switches to 2nd person. And then he says, you are my servant and my messenger. I have named you Al-Mutawakkil. So this is one of those names of the Prophet ﷺ that is not very common, but we find it here. And what it means is somebody who relies on Allah like a lot, right? Al-Mutawakkil, somebody puts his trust in Allah. So Allah himself is describing the Prophet ﷺ as Al-Mutawakkil. And the ayah, in another ayah in the Quran, Allah says, there is no living creature on earth but depends for its sustenance on God. Which means that every living thing, Allah has already appointed its rizq for it, right? So there's some people who think like Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he was asked by somebody, can I just stay in my house or can I just stay in the masjid and like worship all day and then Allah's going to give me my provision? Right? Is that what tawakkul means? And he said, no, that's what somebody who is ignorant would think. That's how he responded. He said, rather, knowledge is to know that Allah has placed my, actually, the Prophet ﷺ said, God has placed my provisions under the shade of my spear. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was explaining to the man that even the Prophet ﷺ said that I myself go out to work. What he meant by the spear thing is like, I myself, I can't sit at home and receive my provision, even as a prophet of God. Like, I have to go out and work. And another hadith that's quoted here about tawakkul is, if you genuinely rely on Allah as He should be relied on, He will give you your provisions. The same way He gives the birds, right? They go out in the morning and they return empty. So the key thing here is that they go out in the morning, right? That's the part. Because the birds could also be sitting in their nest and be like, yeah, Allah's going to give us, worms and whatever. But they go out, right? That's the key thing. And so even birds, they go out and they come back. So the Sahaba, they were merchants, right? They were merchants. They were like tradesmen. They used to take logs and kind of work with those as well. So they had every kind of business or some kind of thing they did. They had a provision, like profession, to get their provision. Now they mentioned a specific group of people who are very spiritual, shall we say, and they say that we have reached such a high station with Allah that Allah is just going to provide for us out of the blue. Okay? They like to quote the story of Maryam alayhi salam, right? Because Maryam, she said that she would be in her chamber, worshiping Allah in her mihrab, and then Zakaria alayhi salam would come and he would find all these fruits with her, like out of season fruits. And he said, where did these come from? And she would say, these are a rizq from Allah, and He provides without hisab, right? And so they quote this story to say that we also don't need to work because Allah will provide. So how can we reconcile between the two? Yes.
Well, Maryam was already like, she was chosen, like her, even like her birth was kind of like, not as miraculous as Islam, but still in a way miraculous in the Quran. She was already like kind of, not a prophet obviously, but like higher up there, like underneath them, close to them. So like her getting miraculous things it's another thing all by itself. Like the miracles of like people who were not prophets, but they were still like really close to Allah. And regular people, it's like you're regular people, and she's a woman, so it's not like she could go out there and work.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. I like that. So I like that. But there's more. Yes.
It's not that Allah cannot provide, like you said, miracles. Like even if someone is not working, it is possible that he can essentially get rich or find money or get somehow. But that does not mean that's the way of life. Like that's what we do. So like in case of Maryam salam, like she got fruits or whatever, like she got sustenance. But like I'm not sure. Do they know like if she always got that, or does Zakaria salam entered up with
I believe it was a pretty regular thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's like not to rely on that. It's to accept that as a miracle, but not like still tie your camel.
Yeah. Okay.
Like still do your part in this.
Yeah.
To make sure. So maybe that's the reliance part on it, like fully relying on it.
Okay.
Well, being grateful for what it is.
Yeah. Anjali, I may have said something.
Huh?
Huh?
Make a dua, a child that
Yeah.
will be inherit
Maryam's mother.
make a special dua.
Yeah.
And then she was to go, and then she say that her mom was saying that she want to be
Still pay for it.
yeah, and then Allah gave the
Yeah.
Maryam.
Yeah.
And then Allah and she was asking Allah to seek a refuge from her and to protect her from Shaitan.
Yeah.
And I think that was a special medical person that Maryam made a dua to be in the masjid. I think that was a special case, exceptional case.
Okay. Okay, so I think we all kind of touched upon that, right? The exceptional case part, like miracles, Allah wants to show you His power. We believe that it can happen, but we don't rely on it, right? Those are all amazing. You guys all touched upon the main thing. So what we have is that in Islam you have certain things, like not just Islam actually. The way I would explain it is in the world, right? Allah created the laws of physics. Allah created certain laws. He just did, and we are bound by them. Allah is not bound by them, right? Allah is not bound by the laws that He created, right? So what happens, like a miracle by definition is something that does not make sense. Like it does not logically make sense. Like it just happens from Allah, right? Like you can't explain a miracle, right? So it breaks, I'll come to you in a second. It breaks the laws. Surah Maryam, the theme of Surah Maryam is actually miracles, and it's the mercy of Allah. And the name of Allah that gets repeated in that surah over and over is Ar-Rahman, right? Because Allah constantly wants to show you what's possible. And so that's the name He wants you to call upon Him by. And so the story of Zakaria, that was a miracle. The story of Maryam, it's a miracle. And then as we go into the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, there's miracles in there too. And then Allah ends the surah also by mentioning different miracles, and how Allah will put love in the believers' hearts for each other, right? So the whole surah is all about what is possible. So having reliance, so yes, as humans, we all have to work because that is the means, right? And Allah created the means, but Allah does not need the means. And from the story of Maryam, the biggest thing we learned is that, like, for a child to come into this world, you need two parents, right? That's the means. But Allah's like, I'm going to remove the means and still create a child. So Allah's like, I don't have to rely on the means. So He's showing us that the means are for you, they're not for me. And sometimes I will break it to increase your trust, right? That's the relationship between trust and miracles. Because the more you trust Allah, the more likely miracles are going to happen for you. You don't live your life relying on miracles, but you can put your trust in Allah that He's going to provide from wherever possible, right? That's what He says in Surah Talaq, actually, the first 3 ayahs. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, right? Like, whoever fears Allah, He's going to make a way out for him, and He's going to provide from places He did not expect. That's a miracle, right? So you're putting in the work, you're doing everything you can, but the fruits of your labor might be way multiplied, like beyond what you imagined. And that's the kind of tawakkul all of us have to have, right? Like, if you imagine just a little, like you're doing all this work and you imagine like a little victory, try to grow your tawakkul a little bit and imagine a bigger victory, right? Imagine like a bigger opportunity for yourself. You're still doing the work, you're doing everything you can, you're tying your camel, but expect from Allah something bigger. Like, don't limit Allah with your imagination, right? Because that's what your tawakkul should do. Like, it should expand your imagination, expand possibilities, because you're doing the work, but you're not relying on your efforts, you're relying on Allah to give you, right? The efforts are just there because you have to take the means, that's why. You want to show Allah like, okay, I'm doing this, like I'm tying my camel. The Prophet ﷺ told me to tie it, so I'll tie it. But whatever I get back, that's from Allah's generosity. That has nothing to do with me, right? Because when Musa ﷺ put the staff in the ocean, he just did his part, but that stick there was no way that stick is gonna, there's no power in the stick to do that, right? There's no way, but Allah's like, you just do it, and I'm gonna show you what I can do, right? So that's just when you like show, like when you place tawakkul in Allah, He'll show you a miracle. The miracle is supposed to increase you in tawakkul, and then Allah shows you bigger miracles. And so when certain people say, I'm gonna go back to my first point and then I'll come back to you. When certain people say like, okay, I don't need to like take the means anymore because I'm so close to Allah that miracles just keep happening for me, that's erroneous, because they're depending on the miracle now, right? They're depending on what they think is a solid connection with Allah. But shaitan can deceive you anytime, because you might have a good connection with Allah and then arrogance seeps in and you just drop down, right? Spiritually, your level just became lower because you thought you were like up here with Allah, and then Allah's like, yeah, I don't think so, and you go down. Whereas one day you might be like feeling really like low because of your sins, and then you make tawbah and Allah brings you all the way up here, right? So we can't be ever 100% sure of like, I'm solid with Allah, right? We have to have that little bit of doubt. Like even the Sahaba had that. They would know that they're believers, but with the doubt that they might be hypocrites. Right? They always had that fear that, what if I'm a hypocrite? Like, I know I'm a believer, but what if, right? So we can't be sure 100% like, yes, I'm a believer, like I'm good with Allah. If I die today, I'm going to Jannah. That's like overconfidence, right? We should have that little bit of thing like, am I a hypocrite? Like, do I need to fix myself? Like, am I really sincere with Allah? Am I really doing everything? So that tiny dose, that's healthy, right? That you're supposed to have that. And shaitan unfortunately did not have that. He thought like he was 100% like, good with Allah. That's where the arrogance came from. Yes, what were you going to say?
Honestly, like with everything you said, it kind of touched upon what I was going to say. It was like, with like Maryam Salam Alaiha, it was more of a, like, Zakaria's, like, everything's connected. And like Allah does things based on like, if I do something, then that could be an answer, somebody else's something else. So what I was thinking was that like her existence and her like the fruit was like basically another encouragement for Zakaria or something, like make dua, like if she can get this, then even in this old age I can get, like it was like a push to like make dua for a son. Yeah. Even though I'm sure he's done it like before, but it was like, it was like that yaqeen. It was like, okay, if she can get it, like like her words was like basically like a byproduct of like what happened to help him like realize that if she has such conviction, then why, like I'm prophetic, why don't I? And this is just my
Exactly.
thinking
Yeah.
that was supposed to be there so that
It was actually, yeah. It comes in part of the tafsir. It does, yeah.
And
Zakaria alayhi salam, he did increase his his yaqeen did increase because of Maryam.
She inspired him.
yeah,
Inspired him,
absolutely.
yeah. So when he saw the provisions, yes, it did inspire him. I'm glad you brought that
Yeah,
up.
I feel like every little thing is dependent. That's why that was there, as opposed to like for laymen.
Yeah, for him and for us, right? Because
Definitely.
when we read that story, and I know you mentioned earlier also that point of she was a woman, maybe she didn't, what if she didn't have the means? So what that tells us is that even though we have to use the means, what if we don't have the means?
Right.
So Allah's telling us, I don't need the means. So like if you're in a desperate situation, don't let that stop you, right? Like if you're like, let's say you're trying to apply for some job and you're like, but I don't have the skills, I don't have the resume, I don't have anything. Like, you know, maybe you're a refugee coming from somewhere and you don't have anything, but you make dua. Allah's teaching you from the story of Maryam that He can provide things in a way that don't make sense, right? So again, that tawakkul piece comes in, that yes, we take all our steps, but what if you can't?
Right.
What if your hands are tied? What if you're in a really, really bad situation? And then what, right? And then people will be like, okay, well, if you just make dua, does that count? So I want to share what Shaykh Muhammad al-Sharif shared, rahimahullah. So one of his students was talking to him and he said, should I just make dua, Shaykh? I thought we have to take action. You always talk about action, right? He said dua is action. Dua is action. So we should never think of dua as just dua, right? When you're making dua to Allah, that's an ibadah of the heart. It's an ibadah of your tongue. And that is your action, right? Like you're actually doing ibadah of Allah. It's the core of ibadah. So we shouldn't ever discount dua. So if you're stuck, just make dua and then ask Allah to show you what action you should take, right? How He can open doors for you. Yeah. Yes.
Allah will you to this. Allah will not, Allah will not let, Allah will take care of us. Allah will not leave us alone. You can go. And she was finding in this water after they
Yeah.
came out. So tawakkul is, it's very important. That
Exactly.
you trust in Allah. That things you work.
Exactly.
The things, sometimes you work, and things not happen the way you want.
Yeah.
And sometimes you work, and the things happen the way.
Exactly.
The same thing you
Yeah.
have to tawakkal. Allah is the one who offers all control things.
And even though he told her,
She still did it. Yeah.
she didn't just sit there.
She made
Yeah.
action. She ran it out.
Yeah.
And Maryam herself, she was shaking. The way she was
Yeah. When she shook the tree. Yeah.
She had the baby.
Yeah.
She still had to shake it.
She shaked that.
Yeah.
She worked towards it, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And like Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda, he explained the shaking part, the tree. He was like, do you think Allah's actually telling her to shake the tree? Like, she's in labor. How is a woman in labor going to shake the tree? All she had to do was touch it. That's all he meant. Just touch the tree. Things will fall. Right? Like, that's just do something. That's all. Just do something. Allah will do it, right? So it's just miraculous. I love that story. I love Surah Maryam so much. Okay, so back to the provisions thing. The Prophet ﷺ said that the best thing a person eats is that which he has earned through working. And Prophet Dawood alayhi salam used to eat only of his own earnings. This is so interesting because in the Quran, Allah tells Dawood alayhi salam and his family, O family of Dawood, work in shukr. Right? That's why it's translated, but the actual translation is like work shukr, like actually work gratitude. So Allah made the gratitude itself the actual work that He's doing, meaning the work that you do and the gratitude that you have is so intertwined that it's actually inseparable from each other. Right? So the family of Dawood alayhi salam, we know that he was given the ability to bend iron, and he was made into a king. He was a king, right? And Sulaiman alayhi salam was also a king. So they were a royal family. And so what Allah was teaching him and his family is that the more you have, the more shukr you must do. And part of your shukr is just like, alhamdulillah, yeah, like Allah's blessed us, and you're just like sitting, reclining on your cushion, like doing nothing all day. Can you imagine the good that Dawood alayhi salam and his family were doing with that wealth that they had? Like, imagine the amount of charity that they were giving probably. How many poor people were they taking care of? How many orphans were they taking care of? Like, having a prophet as a king, I don't think we really think about that, right? A prophet as a king, what are his policies going to be, right? How does he put fear into his enemies' hearts, like the bad people, I guess? And then how does he invite people to Islam? And we know the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, obviously, right? Like how he was so smart. But Allah told Dawood alayhi salam specifically to work in gratitude. because he's saying that I've given you everything, now show me what you're going to do with it, right? That's part of your gratitude. And so the Prophet ﷺ, there's a connection here that he used to eat only of his own earnings. He didn't, like, even though he's a king, he used to work, he still used to work for his food. And so we work, but we don't rely on our work itself, but we rely on Allah to give us the result. The other qualities that I mentioned about the Prophet ﷺ is that he was neither rude nor unkind nor quarrelsome in the markets. So he would never do anything that would turn people away from Allah, turn people away from himself, because he's the teacher, right? So he's smart enough to know that as the messenger, he has to carry himself a certain way, otherwise people will be turned away from the message. So he acts always as the messenger, right? He never used to get angry for his own sake, but he would get angry for the sake of Allah. Yes?
Wasn't there a scene like when after the, gosh, I always mess them
No, it's okay.
wars up. One of the battle of either Badr or Uhud, the one we lost. That
Uhud, yeah.
what do you call it? Like when, because it was because of the youngsters were like, you know, let's go into the city
Yeah.
or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so didn't like, I mean, once again, like this is what I heard, so don't quote me. But it's like, I didn't Allah said if you were harsh with them,
Yeah.
then they would turn away and they would like, they would not. Like,
Yes. I don't know if that was the incident, but there was.
Like they wanted, he wanted to like, you know, listen, he should listen to their like if they're saying something, like
Yeah.
take their advice as well, not
Yeah.
just, you know, because of what, like those be like because of what happened, we're not listening to you. It's like regardless of what happened, you still must take their what is that word?
Their advice.
Advice.
Their counsel, yeah. Yeah, so
they don't feel like you're turning off, even though they're
exactly.
guilty as is.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it was Uhud. I think it was a different battle, but yeah, the Sahaba felt hurt. They felt insecure to go in front of the Prophet ﷺ again. They felt afraid. So Allah said, like, if you had been harsh, they would have left you.
Right,
but still take their advice so that they feel included and they don't feel like you've cut off that connection from them, even though you're upset. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So so Allah would constantly teach the Prophet ﷺ how to be with the Sahaba, and he would act on it. In the marketplace thing, it's mentioned specifically, but I wanted to ask you guys before I say it, what is the connection between tawakkul and being rude in the marketplace? Rude and selfish and aggressive and, you know, just whatever kind of bad behavior you see in the marketplaces. What's the connection between that?
I think when people are rude in the marketplace, I'm thinking in modern day, like when you go back home, it's sometimes they think they're not going to be able to get a product because other people get it, or they're kind of looking at the end result. While Tawakkul teaches us that the end result is kind of not in our hands. If you're destined to get that product, you'll get it. And
Yeah.
so just do Tawakkul, just be patient.
Exactly. So like part of tawakkul is to know that everything has already been written for you. So true tawakkul actually brings a sense of calm into everything you do. So there's no sense of urgency and anxiety over, I'm going to lose this item, I'm going to lose this opportunity. Like, you know, during Black Friday sales, the websites crash.
Yeah.
Why do they crash? Like even Amazon crashes sometimes, you know, like Cyber Monday, Amazon crashes. Like why? Because people are dying to get their hands on some product, right? But it's like that anxiety of like FOMO, like I'm gonna lose something, that actually shows a lack of tawakkul. And it means that something spiritually is lacking. Like we don't trust Allah enough that He's gonna give us everything we need, right? That it's gonna reach us somehow, right? So people who are extremely just really badly behaving in the marketplaces, they're afraid of just losing a good deal, right? And they're willing to talk down to people. They're willing to fight with people over the shopkeeper or the other customers. The other thing they're doing is they're actually cheating the person out of their right sometimes, right? The merchants, like they're really lowering the price so much. Like back home, you start walking away. Yeah, exactly. And then the people start chasing you, like, oh, don't go, don't leave. Like, I'll give you the price you want. I hate that. Like, it cringes me out. Like, I can't deal with it. It's one of my biggest pet peeves ever, the whole marketplace thing, because, oh, by the way, the Prophet ﷺ himself, before I say that, he himself, when he would buy something, sometimes he would leave it with the person. He wouldn't even take it. He would buy something and he would just leave it. He would pay for it and leave it there. Or he would take a little bit of it and go. Like if it was like a handful of dates or something, he'd take a few, not even take the full product that he bought and just leave it there. So it was a form of charity that he was practicing without making the seller feel bad about himself.
So charity to the person.
Yeah, charity to the person selling. So it's like, I'm gonna pay you, like if you say like, oh, like, I don't know, $5 for like a whole, bag of dates and I take half the bag, but I still pay you $5. So you still made your money, but I didn't take enough of your things. Yeah, exactly. So I left more of your product there so you could sell it. So he would do things like that, and that was part of his generosity. So if you did that today, I guarantee you people will call you crazy.
Yes.
If you went to the market and you did that today, people will call you crazy. That shows how far away we are from the sunnah. Like, I guarantee you, if you went back home and if your mom or your dad or your aunt was with you, somebody elder who knows the markets, they would probably yell at you in the marketplace for doing something like that, right? Or for not bargaining, simply not bargaining. Like, if you're going to a country as a Westerner and you know you can afford something, why haggle over a couple of rupees or dinars or whatever? Like, why is that? We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. Well, this is an adab book, right? One thing I wish Muslims would learn from this book is we don't have to be that stingy. Because wallahi, we have to believe that Allah will give us barakah. Allah will give us barakah. Because that person is an honest seller. They're trying to make an honest living. They're poor a lot of times, Like people haggle with the vegetable seller, the fruit sellers.
Even with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you will get opportunities to
Yeah.
do things that maybe, this happens a lot here because we have a lot of Islamic influences in Northern Virginia, where we could take a job with an Islamic group,
Yeah.
but obviously it's non-profit, you make less money, and people will haggle a deal with
Yeah.
those groups, and it's like you have to also have belief that the barakah you're going to get
Yeah.
is going to give you so much more
Yeah.
than
That's
the
true.
extra $10,000 that you'd make
Yeah.
from another organization or.
That's true. But yeah. I forgot what I was gonna say. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, well, based on what you said, I'm totally for it. Like what you're saying, if you can afford it, then go for it. But I feel, and I've seen this, it's like, I haven't been back in forever, but I've seen this, like, if you're honest, and if you want to show honesty, then they will jip you off. Like, if
Okay,
you,
they sometimes will, yeah.
Because then they steal from you, and they'll for example, let's just say this particular thing costs $10 or 10 rupees or whatever, or 10 dinar, whatever it is, and you're like, okay, fine, I'll give it to you. Because they see it, that you can earn it, they'll double the price up just to mess with you or to haggle, basically them get it out of you. And I've seen that.
Yeah.
Because I was all about why are we doing this? Just give them money and call it a day. And the man was like, no, if you do that, then they'll think you're rich and they're just gonna take money from you, just buy whatever.
Well,
I mean, that's
also
true.
wonder if it encourages that kind of practice, because then you're encouraging them to kind of increase the price.
Exactly, and the
you're
people
not
there can't
encouraging
afford it.
honesty.
So I feel like
Yeah.
not to haggle, but at the end of the day, not to really ask for a super
Yeah.
duper low price. Just kind of balance it out in the middle.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel like we also haggle for our inner selves. Like we want to say oh, we bargained it that much. Like we should also be we bargain at a
No, I
price
hear
where
you, I
we
hear
think
you.
it's fair for the seller as well.
Yeah, like my mom, she went back last time, and she got so confused. So the dude's like, let's just say he's like 700.
Yeah.
She's like, no, I'll take it 900. Like not even knowing that he's like. She looks like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
She's lowering it down. She doubled the mic because she couldn't remember the number.
Yeah.
In non-English.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, I'll take this one. My mom's sister was like, shh, let me handle it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets really confused, especially because you're the West, and it's just you just give and you go.
I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that point because yes, still do that. I would say just be smart about it, Because okay, one thing, no matter how you dress or act or talk, they know you're a foreigner. Like if you go from here, if you go from anywhere, they just figure it out. Like sometimes. Oh really?
Your body language is,
Oh.
especially for women.
Okay, I have no idea.
Because body language in certain countries for women is completely different,
Oh,
especially American.
interesting. Okay.
Because it's even
Yeah.
they've done studies show it's a sense of modesty too, right?
Yeah.
Just not being so out there.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's very hard to change. The way
Wow,
you stand, the
yeah.
way you walk, since birth,
Yeah,
it's very hard
exactly.
to change that.
Wow, that's really
Even
interesting.
if you don't open your mouth, look down the whole time.
All I said was thank you to this one Pakistani woman. That's it. She's like, you're not from here. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, I'm like, where are you from? And my parents are like, don't say anything because we were visiting.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm like, well, I'm from Dubai because we had a stay over.
Yeah.
So I was like, Dubai. And she's like, see, you're not from here. I'm like, okay, relax.
Yeah.
All I said was thank you for your kindness or whatever. She was just like, no,
Yeah.
you're not from here.
Okay, so I did want to say okay, yeah, don't get ripped off. Don't let people take advantage of you. That goes without saying. And there's also a reason why kids of a certain age are not even allowed to make bigger transactions, bigger purchases.
Right.
So like if you're a seller, you're not allowed to sell above a certain limit to a child, because it would be counting as deception, because a child, no, right now too. Right now, like for example, like if a seller is sending, like, you know those toys, how sometimes they overprice them on Amazon or eBay or whatever. Like if you're a Muslim seller, part of your selling etiquette is that you're not allowed to sell an expensive item to a child without the parents being there, because a child doesn't have that understanding. Exactly. So there's the sellers have rules and the buyers have rules, right? So you have to be careful. You can sell candy to a child at, like, you know, the melas or the festivals and stuff that happens, but you don't want to be selling like a $300 something toy to a child, because then you're exploiting them. It can count as that. But in terms of when you said, Rida, when you're talking about how the sellers will exploit you, I would still say that in the marketplace Prophet was a part of, people were still bargaining. The marketplace is not going to change because of one person, right? People are still going to bargain. People are still going to haggle for prices. The marketplace will always be a place of just bad things, you know? Like the Prophet has said that already. Like it's a place of, like shaitan likes to be there. But if we follow upon the sunnah, Allah will, I truly believe Allah will have our back. Sometimes somebody might even think that they cheated you and got away with it.
Right.
But that's between them and Allah. And they'll see it, because their barakah will get removed from them, because they cheated you. Because they saw, oh, this is a foreigner, they don't know what they're talking about. Right. Let me take advantage of them. Yeah. If you got taken advantage of, unfortunately, and you didn't know, they have to deal with that. Absolutely. Right? But I still truly believe that part of our tawakkul is to still act upon the sunnah, even when we're afraid. Right? Because doing the right thing is scary, but when you keep doing it, you're growing your courage and you're growing your tawakkul. And Allah will constantly have your back. There's no way that you'll do something for the sake of Allah and you'll take a loss. That'll never be a thing. Okay, the second quality was, sorry, not second, it's like the fourth one or something. Who does not repel a bad deed by a bad one. So if he was ever hurt by someone, if they said bad things to him, if they disrespected him in public, if they insulted him, he would never repeat the insult. He would never pass it back. He would always either stay quiet or respond with something better, depending on the situation, who it was. But he would never, like, if somebody cursed him, it's not like he would curse them back, or like, you don't know who I am, whatever. Right. None of that. The Prophet was not that type of person. And he never personally avenged himself, ever. He never took revenge on someone for his own personal sake. But if it was, then it was on the battlefield for the sake of Islam, right? If the kuffar had done something to the Muslims, then he would take revenge, but it was not for himself ever. And he was instructed by Allah to return a bad deed for a good one, so as to erase its effect. So there's a hadith by the Prophet that says, fear Allah wherever you are, follow up a bad deed with a good one, and it will erase it, and behave towards people with a good behavior, right? Those three, they cover like everything, because one has, the first thing is taqwa, the second thing is between you and Allah, so you get to erase your bad deeds, and the third is between you and the people, right? So it's a very short hadith, but it's a really good one. If you just act upon that, you'll be good. The other thing, he's described as one who forgives and pardons. So it's kind of similar to the first one, but when his enemies used to come to him and they used to hurt him, sometimes he would show them, like, you know, his strength or whatever, but he would forgive them as well. So depending on who it is, if he knew the person's heart would be softened to Islam, then he would forgive him on the spot, so the person would come to Islam. Because they'll be like, oh my God, like, I just insulted this person, and how is he being so, you know, nice to me? Like the story of the woman who used to bring trash to his house, right? And she used to bring it every day, and, you know, he would trip on it, so I sent him everything. And one day it was gone. So he said, what happened to the trash? Why isn't it coming anymore? And somebody's like, you know, she's sick. So he goes to her house, he asks about how she is. And she was like, she couldn't believe her eyes. She's like, I've been making your life difficult for the past, like, God knows how many months, and why are you here asking about my health? And he's like, that's just who I am, that's what I do. You know, I'm a messenger of Allah, like, it's my job to, you know, and she became Muslim, right? So things like that. There's so many stories like that in the seerah where people showed him unkindness, they disrespected him, whatever, and he showed them back the same level of kindness, if not more. And they were just, their hearts melted, right? That's how he won hearts, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Okay, then, okay, so the length of his mission. Okay, so Allah will not cause him to die until He has through him strengthened the faith that has become so crooked, until the followers will say there is no deity other than God. It was basically Allah will not cause the Prophet ﷺ death until all the people became believers and they become true believers. So that's what happened in his time. Of course, we know like the majority of the Arabian clans, by the end of his prophecy, they had accepted Islam, right? After the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, there was so much da'wah going on that the Arabian Peninsula had pretty much become Muslim. And whatever Jews and Quraysh were left, they kind of were weakened by that time, right? They had no more influence left in Arabia. So that was Allah's promise to him. And this promise was in the Torah as well, which kind of can give us a hint why the Jews were so afraid, right? Because the Jews saw it coming, the rabbis saw it coming. If this description is in the Torah, that means they knew that by the time the Prophet's mission is done, we're going to have no power left. About the Prophet, yeah. So this description of his, it was, it's mentioned in this hadith, but it was in the Torah as well. So you know how there was a comparison going on, the Quran and Torah, yeah. So they knew, the Jewish rabbis, they knew about all of these descriptions, and they knew that by the time the prophethood is over, that they would be lost, like they would lose basically the power that they had. Okay, and it specifically mentions that the people who believe, they will say La ilaha illallah, and their blind eyes will open, and their deaf ears will basically hear again, and their sealed hearts will open. Okay, so those are the three things that Allah mentions in Surah Baqarah as well, right? The people who are blind and they can't hear and their hearts are sealed. So when La ilaha illallah enters your heart and it comes onto your tongue, it's like you've become alive. You're spiritually alive. You were dead and you become alive. So it's not a passive sort of acceptance of Islam. It's a very active sort of acceptance. And that's what we saw the Sahaba, that's the kind of people they were, right? Even like the individual stories we see of the Sahaba, whatever qualities they had before Islam, it only made them shine after Islam, right? Like I think Tufayl ibn Amr ad-Dawsi, he was the one who went back to his tribe and made the entire tribe Muslim just by his acceptance of the Shahada, right, of Islam. Like as soon as some of these Sahaba, as soon as they became Muslim, they literally rushed back home and brought their whole tribe back to the Prophet ﷺ, and the whole tribe accepted Islam, right? So they were leaders, they were go-getters. They weren't just like, yeah, I'm Muslim, but like I'm just gonna go hide in a corner, right? They wouldn't hide in a corner unless they were about to be killed and the Prophet ﷺ told them to hide, right? The only time they hid is because if he told them to hide. But the Sahaba were proud believers. They were strong and they wanted everybody to become Muslim. That's the kind of acceptance they had. It was a very real and a very strong acceptance. And then the Quran mentions more of the qualities, but I don't know, I think they're in the hadith. Okay, it's a little confusing. Okay, so the next hadith is Muawiyah reports, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say some words by which God has given me clear benefit. I heard him say, if you delve into people's secret faults, you will corrupt them. Therefore, I do not go into people's secrets so that I will not corrupt them. So we're at the end, but I'll just talk about this last hadith. So, okay, people have private sins and public sins, right? So your private sins are between you and Allah, and you should attempt to keep them private. If you find out about somebody's private sin, you keep it private. It is not your business to go advertising. Oh, but I just wanted to help the person. Oh, but I just wanted to. No, we don't make excuses. You just happen to find out about somebody's private sin, or they come to you and they're confiding in you, trying to seek help, and you go around telling them because you want to tarnish their reputation, or just even make it seem like, sometimes people act very innocent. Like they're like, oh, do you know that so-and-so, is struggling with like this or that? Oh, how sad, right? Poor thing, they're struggling with this. But you're saying it in a gathering, exactly. Right? So like what sympathy are you trying to show? Like unfortunately this happens way too often. Like, oh, do you know what happened to that person? Like they were doing this and this. We don't want to have those conversations about people, right? If something, like, just take it back to yourself. If you don't want somebody to know something about you, most likely people don't want you to talk about those things about them either. So what is meant by you will corrupt them is that if someone's public sin, if somebody's private sin remains private, maybe they're coming back to Allah every night, every day, and you don't know about it. Maybe somebody is an alcoholic, but every single day they're repenting. And they're motivated to repent because they're like, well, nobody knows about it. It's between me and Allah. Allah covered me. So the relationship with Allah is good, right? Because they see themselves as a sinning servant and they see Allah as the merciful Rabb that He is. And they have this husn al-dhan in Allah that I'm struggling, but I'm going to keep going back to Allah regardless. I'm not going to stop, right? And that's how people deal with their private sins often. Now, if because of you, it goes public, now that person might be driven to rebellion. Right. they might feel like, well, Allah, why didn't Allah cover me? Right? Or they might start to feel like, well, the Muslim community is all like this, or like religious people are all like this. They want to just make us look bad, or anything can happen. Or between your personal relationship with that person gets ruined, and then they're like, well, I don't care about what you think. I'm going to go take this sin public now. Right? It's just out of spite. So you became the cause for this person to now commit the sin publicly, and they became more, like they dug in their heels now. Whereas before they were kind of like feeling guilty about it, whatever. But now that you made it public and people started to like, say things to them, ruin their reputation, they come in the community, people look at them a certain way, then what are they going to do? They're going to leave that environment and go to an environment where they're not going to be judged for that sin anymore. Right? So if they were drinking alcohol in the privacy of their home, now you set them to the club, at the bar, right? Because nobody's going to judge them over there.
Or stop them.
Exactly. No one's going to stop them. Nobody knows them. Nobody's going to judge them over there. So we become the people who drive people away, right? So that's why Muawiyah said that I heard the Prophet ﷺ say this, and that's why I don't delve into people's secrets. I keep people's secrets where they are, and I don't deal with it, and I don't say anything to anyone, because I don't want to be the reason why somebody goes away from Islam. I don't want to corrupt them. Okay, and the commentator is saying that perhaps the Prophet ﷺ said this specific thing to Muawiyah because his role was going to be that he would become the governor of Syria for 20 years before he became Khalifa, right? And we know that there was a whole, like, the Sunni Shia thing that happened, and, there are people who don't like Muawiyah for that reason. The Shias don't like Muawiyah for that reason. Of course, we respect and we love all the Sahabas, but it's really interesting that the Prophet ﷺ, obviously he knows what's going to happen, right? Because Allah tells him what's going to happen. So it's very highly likely that he told them this specific piece of advice because there was going to be a lot of fitna that was going to ensue, and he would need this hadith to hold on to deal with that fitna. All right, we'll stop over here. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Do you have any questions, comments? Yes. Which laws? Oh yeah, I mean, I just meant like any physical laws, like gravity, or like Newton's law, or whatever, or cause and effect. Actually, that's a really important one. One of my teachers, the way she explained it to us in Aqidah class is that she took a marker and just threw it to the side, right? She's like, why did the marker go there? And we're like, because you threw it. We're 12-year-olds, okay? She's like, no, the marker did not go there because I threw it. It went there because Allah wanted it to.
Right.
That's it. That's the cause and effect. Like for us, yes. Like if I touch fire, I'm gonna get burned. But is it necessary that I get burned? No. I mean, for me, yeah, because I'm average. But with Ibrahim alayhi salam, he touched fire. He didn't get burned, right? So it's like we have these laws and we live by them, and we don't try to break them. Obviously, I'm not gonna jump into a fire and be like, yeah, Allah, cool it for me. That's suicide. But it's like Allah shows you in the Quran places where He breaks the laws Himself to show you that He's not bound by the laws. Because the laws for us, they're a form of limitation. But Allah is constantly showing us that He's above limitation. And that's what subhanallah means. Subhanallah means that Allah is above any limitation. Right? Because sabaha in Arabic means to swim. When you're swimming, you're staying above water. So when you say subhanallah, it's appropriate to say subhanallah when something inappropriate is being said about Allah. Or when some limitation is being placed in a situation. You say subhanallah to remind yourself that Allah is above any limitation. Allah is perfect. So yeah, cause and effect is a great one. Like, I can do something and I hope for a certain result, but if I don't get it, it means Allah just didn't want it to happen. So we're constantly aware of Allah's hand in everything and how He's playing an active role in our lives and everything. Yeah. All right. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Do you think that women have the same roles as men? Like, we have to live fictional lives? I mean, like, act like, I can stay home, take care of our family. Is that enough? Really not enough. Like, if you have a husband.
If you have a husband, if you have any provider in your life, then no, you don't have to provide.
Not provide, but do you have to go out there and do da'wah and like?
No.
Or you could just stay home.
You can stay home, but if you're raising your kids, that's your ibadah. That's your ibadah.
It just doesn't feel like enough. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's
Make who happy? The kids? Allah, okay. So the Sahabiyat, they would, a lot of them, we know some of them were businesswomen, some of them were scholars, some of them were whatever, but a lot of them just sat at home and worshipped Allah. We have a range of examples in the Prophet's own wives. We have the Prophet's own wives, right? Like after he passed away, Aisha radiallahu anha, she was a scholar, right? But were all of them scholars? Probably not, right? Like we know Juwayriyah, she was knowledgeable, yes, but she used to do a lot of private worship, personal worship. She would worship a lot, but she wasn't teaching as much as Aisha radiallahu anha was, right? So there, even within the wives of Prophet ﷺ, we have so many examples. Like they were go-getters, they were more bold women with bold personalities, outspoken, all of that. And then you had some who were very quiet and content to be in their home all day until they passed away. And so I think the question you're asking, what I want you to ask yourself, especially if it's a personal question, is am I just responding to the conditioning of this society and this culture that we constantly have to be doing something? Or is it because you have a personal desire, a personal ambition that you want to complete and you're not being able to complete it, right? Because what Allah, I think the best way to answer the question, what does Allah want from me, is are you using the gifts Allah gave you? And you could be an amazing nurturer, right? And you're doing an amazing job at nurturing your children. That means you are fulfilling your potential and you are utilizing the gifts Allah gave you. So you are actually showing gratitude. But for there's some women, they're just, mashallah, they're go-getters. So for them, it would almost be like, not like, if they don't fulfill their potential, like for them, they're wired to do both, right? They can do both. They can take care of their home, their husband, their children, and they can go out and work. And mashallah, they can excel at both. But you shouldn't compare yourself to somebody who can do that, because we all have been given different abilities and skills, right? And so Allah's not gonna ask you based off of what He gave somebody else, but simply, are you fulfilling your own potential, right? Are you doing everything you can in your own power? But again, that shouldn't be defined by like the capitalist culture. There's
I had went to a lecture in Qatar and it was a go-getter and she's like, we should have a Ummah project, all women, we should be out there. You know, it's not enough that you just stay home and take care of your kids. You should do something for the Ummah. You should have a huge project. Why not? Like you are powerful. You're not just a woman who should just stay home and listen to her husband, but like you should do more. You know, and then just,
See, it's funny because I am like that too. I want to do everything, but I don't think there's anything wrong with what she said. But I think what she might be alluding to is like a lack of mediocrity. Don't be mediocre. Because what women, a lot of women sitting at home, I'm going to be honest, what they're doing is they're just watching TV all day, right? Like a lot of women, when they're raising their kids, they're just watching TV all day, or they're just like, they're involved in gossip. There's nothing productive happening. So if you're sitting at home and you're learning, that's good. Learn Quran, learn Tajweed, learn something. Even secular sciences, pick up a hobby. Like, you don't have to be a go-getter and conquer the world, but you do have to do something meaningful, right? Because wasting time, whether you're a man or a woman, is looked down upon, right? Wasting time is what we don't want to do. Like, we don't want to show up on the Day of Judgment because we're going to be asked those 5 questions, like, what did you do with the knowledge that was given to you? What did you do with the money that was given to you? How did you earn your rizq? And I think there were 2 more, but they're not coming to me right now. But we are going to be asked those questions, man or woman. So it's just about how you prioritize and how you're using your time. That's all. Yeah, of course.